Okay, it's 4 p.m. sharp, so I'll get the webinar started. Just before we get started, I just want to give everyone introductions. For today's webinar, we'll talk about API as the main topics, and the subjects of this webinar is about API test automation at scale. In this webinar, we'll feature how Liberty Latin America saves hundreds of man-hours each month by automating their API tests. The background behind this is APIs are taking over the center stage at Liberty Latin America. And this really what drive Logan Nathans, our guest speaker today, and his team to rethink what they have to do to ensure the performance and reliability of their systems. Right, so in this webinar, our Director of Solution Engineer Gokul and Logan Nathan will share their thoughts, best practice on API testing, and more importantly, his experience on how Liberty Latin America automate their manual API tests so they can focus their efforts on other high-value activities that relate to testing. So highlights including API testing best practice tips, the role of API testing, and also the journey to Logan Nathan personal journey to API tests and automations. So that will be on the agenda for today's call. So with that, let's get started.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session with one of our interesting customers here today. I'm happy to welcome Logu from Liberty Latin America. And today we are going to talk about API test automation at scale. We're going to talk about how Liberty Latin America's transformation into API testing happened and how they saved a lot of man-hours each month by automating their API tests. So Logu, welcome to the session today. We're really excited to have you here. So thank you for your time and thank you for joining here.
Thanks, Gokul. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure joining this webinar.
Yeah, thank you. Why don't we do a quick introduction of you and your background, how you got into CWC and what your journey has been so far.
Sure. Yeah. So I have extensive experience in leading and implementing automation testing solutions for multiple engagements in my 14 plus or 15 plus years of experience in QA industry. And right now I'm working for Capgemini as a digital assurance and quality engineering manager. And currently I lead the offshore automation testing team for the client Liberty Latin America. And how I got into CWC, it was like say 7-8 months before when there was an opportunity for me to get associated with CWC because things were done manually there. In the sense, they wanted some expertise to get into, see how their landscape is right now and what we can do to reduce the manual testing that is happening in their landscape and bring in the automation solutions. So that's how I got introduced with CWC and Liberty Latin America. And regarding Liberty Latin America, as you know, it is a leading telecommunications company. And it's operating over 20 plus countries, right? And across Liberty Latin America and the Caribbean under the consumer brands, different brands like say VTR, Flow, Liberty, BTC, and Cabletica. So, and right now I'm managing the offshore QA team, and they are providing support on various automation testing solutions or testing requirements for LLA or Liberty Latin America.
That's great to hear. Thank you for a great introduction. So just to reintroduce myself here, my name is Gokul. I currently work at Katalon. I head up the solution engineering division here at Katalon. Been in this quality space for some time. Prior to this, had worked at multiple other software vendors and enterprise software players in the space. So I'm pretty aware of the quality assurance market overall, and I'm really excited to be part of Katalon. Been here for almost 6 months. It's been an exciting journey, and we are going to transform this the overall testing market, if you will. So let's get into the topic for today, which is API testing. And I know this is a really important topic in this day and age, especially with a lot of microservices and omni-channel based applications. What are your thoughts, Logu? Like, why do you think API testing is important?
Yeah, this is really picking up the speed, right? The API layer of any application is one of the most crucial software components, right? And it is the channel which connects the client to server. So this is becoming very key for the business processes to be driven, and it provides the services which gives the value to the users. So obviously, this is becoming one of the hot cake in the market, right? This API testing.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for that perspective, right? And what we have observed, at least in the latest trends globally, is 67% of companies who are surveyed want to invest in API-driven development first, right? A lot of the internet traffic also belongs to API. So there's a lot of investment that's going into APIs, going into the reliability of APIs, making sure that the APIs are tested properly. There are just multiple different aspects that are being considered in today's day and age globally. So just to give another recap, if you will, Logu, if you can, talk about a little bit of the business that you are in with Latin America, and also, the markets that you support. How do you talk to customers in general? How's your customers important to you in what you do with them?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so as you know, right now Liberty Latin America has market over 20 plus countries, right? So 20 plus countries we are serving, and almost we are serving since 13 million people worldwide, right? And when we come to the market, so it's mostly on the Liberty Latin America and the islands over the Liberty Latin America side, right? So
Puerto Rico, US,
the Caribbean under the consumer brands, right? So let me give you some of the markets, say Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and say Saint Lucia, Saint Vincent, and Trinidad, Barbados. So these are the different markets where we are serving the customers. And based on my discussion with customers, so they are very happy, and in the sense we are doing both B2B and B2C, right? So we are doing the business to customer, direct customers, and we are providing them the landline services, the telephone services, and broadband internet connections. And this is one of the services. And also we do B2B. When I say B2B, it's like, so we have connections with another teams and another telecommunication team, which helps setting up the network for the customers, and we interact with them too, in the sense through us they are getting the services that they require for their internet and other mobile services.
That's fantastic, right? I think just looking at it, I think you also made a recent acquisition of AT&T in Puerto Rico, right? So it's just a huge market out there. And it's one of those unique companies, if you will. So it's really, really great to see that. So just going into your test automation journey overall, right? How do you say that, you said you joined 6 months ago, or almost close to a year ago, when everything was manual. And one of the tasks that you were given was to get into an automated testing for a lot of the projects. How's that journey happened so far, and how has Katalon overall helped you in that journey through the automation?
Yeah, sure. So when I joined, right, 6-8 months before, so as I said, most of the testing, right, in LLA space, it was done manually. So the first thing that we thought was, how can we bring in automation? right? So when this question was asked, so there were a lot of answers given. So first we had to train the people. They have to, in the sense, understand the test automation, and after which we want to see the areas where exactly we can bring in the automation. It's not that we say automation, it can be introduced and implemented in implemented everywhere, right? So that was next. And then what would be the, in the sense, expense from our end to bring in this automation? So these were the different types of questions we had. And also we had a requirement to automate different types of testing, right? So be it web application testing or say the desktop application testing. We have a lot of the client applications still, and they have been tested manually by our manual testing team, the functional testing team. And also we wanted to do a certain level of API testing, and also we had to do the mobile testing, because since we are providing the mobile and broadband connections, it's very, very obvious that we have to do the mobile testing. So there were a lot of areas where we were doing the manual testing and we wanted to automate it. So that's when we started, in the sense, evaluate what technology or what tools we can go for. And we in the sense, luckily got an introduction about Katalon Studio, and we evaluated the tool, right? So and it really helped us, and it really supported us in the sense handling or implementing the automation across different technologies and across different platforms. So we evaluated all other tools, but we had other constraints, right? So we had other constraints, and we couldn't move with them because they had limitations on it could support only a certain number of applications, not all applications, or maybe it was very difficult for the engineers who are working in the teams to understand and utilize. So it's a big in the sense, thanks to Katalon for bringing up with such a great tool where any engineer who doesn't have the technical aspect or strong technical knowledge also can utilize the tool and implement the automation. So that's how it started. And what we have done is, first we trained our automation engineers. We started training our functional test engineers on Katalon, and then we started slowly giving them the opportunity to in the sense, build their own automation suite on the testing work that they were doing, right? So whatever domain and technology they were working, say for example, if they are working on testing the manual testing the web-based application, so we have asked them to use Katalon Studio and see how it's working. And with our training, and as well as the training materials available in your say documentations, with that, they were able to pick it up and they were able to do good amount of automation. So right now, our team is more focused on the API testing. The reason is we wanted to have a shift left, and also we wanted to, in the sense, do some early testing rather than doing the testing at the end, at the fag end of the process, right? So on the UI level. So that's where we are currently focusing on, and it really yielded good results, because when we say API automation testing, it requires a lot of technical knowledge, and also the person who's going to do the API automation has to have some, in the sense, good knowledge on Java or good knowledge on the tool that he's going to use, right? So all those the limitations are broken, and Katalon gives us a very good jump start, which we can use for our API automation, and it really saves a lot of time. In the sense, right now it saves currently 100 man hours for a week, and it sums up to around 5,200 man hours for a year. So that's how our journey is currently going on Google.
That's great to hear. I think you've established a ground overall and following a process, built an organization to support it. So just a quick question on that topic, right? For someone who's new to API testing or new to automation in general, what are some of the, tips you would share first? And would you then, the second question is a follow-up to that is, how would you prioritize these different kinds of tests? Would you do an API test first or a web test first? Like if you had 20 different applications, what would you prioritize on based on your learning in the last 6 months to a year within Liberty and before that?
So to answer that question, so first is how do we prepare someone who's joining in our team, right? So yeah, we would give them some kind of exercise in order to first get familiar with API testing. So we'll ask them to use, say, Postman or SOAP UI just to get familiarized with API testing. So they need to know what is the endpoint URL, and they need to know what is the query parameter and how the request can be sent and how the response can be received. So that is what we first train them, and it will take just 4 to 5 hours of training and practice, right? And post which we will expose them to Katalon Studio. And here we have created some demo projects where we have, in the sense, automated the basic APIs, and we have created documentations around it, how this demo project is working and how these APIs can be tested. And that is the first level of training that we would give. And later on, we will, in the sense, allow them to explore with the Katalon Studio and the demo application, so demo APIs. So that's how we give them, in the sense, we first few hours or few days, we'll handhold them, and then we'll just leave them on the ground. So what we have observed is, with this minimal training and with the support of Katalon's inbuilt features, they are able to do the required API testing, right? So they are able to create their own, say, the web service object in Katalon, and they are able to parameterize it because it's all very intuitive and it is very user-friendly in Katalon. So they were able to do that, and they were able to pick it up, and they were able to, in the sense, come up with different scenarios and test the APIs using Katalon Studio. So that is one. And then the second question is, how do we prioritize, right? How do we prioritize the different types of testing that we have? So I'll go back to the basics, right? So let me take the pyramid of testing. So it's always good, or if I put them in layers. So the bottom of the pyramid comes the UI, the unit testing that we do comes at the bottom of the pyramid, and the API testing that we do comes in the middle, in the sense, one layer up to the unit testing, and the GUI testing that comes on top of that pyramid, right? So it means that we have to do this API testing before the UI. There are multiple reasons to it, because sometimes the APIs will be ready before the UI gets ready, and the functional team which is supposed to test that GUI will be waiting for the UI to get created so that they can say do their manual or automation testing. And also these APIs are created very early in the stages, at least the contracts, at least the documents, right? These are defined and created at the very early stage of the development. So that's why we prioritize the API testing next to unit testing. Once the unit testing is done and the fundamentals are ensured they're working fine, then immediately our QA team starts with analyzing the contracts created, that is the API documentations created, which will be the input for the development team, and starts with their static testing. So they understand the contracts are defined correctly or not, all the, in the sense, required schemas are defined correctly or not, if there are any missing testing or not, or missing validations or not. So all those types of static testings are done. And also these APIs are quickly developed by the development team, as I said, just before, even before they create the GUIs and integrate it with them. So we get the APIs first for our testing, and we do the testing for those APIs because we are getting ready since they start with their development. So we go parallel, hand in hand. The development team starts with the API development, and we start creating our API test scripts in Katalon in parallel based on the documentation that we receive. And once it is delivered to us, we kickstart our execution.
That's a really good answer, and thank you so much for sharing so much detail. Right, I think it'd be really useful for someone who's getting into API testing newly, and get an idea of what to prioritize first. So just to add a little bit of more context to that, so you were mentioning about contracts. Could you explain a little bit more about what a contract is? Why is it important in API testing? And that I think would be really helpful for a lot of people listening in as well.
Sure. So when we say contract, right, it is the specification of the API, how it is going to be designed. So it's the, as I said, when I say contract, it is between the client and server. So server is where we are going to, in the sense, connect with and get the details from. And whatever machine or whatever system or whatever application that is going to do a request to get the data is called client. So it is a communication between client and server. So we have to define it. So it is two different people talking to each other right. with a kind of a contract set between them. So this is what I'm going to ask you, and this is what you're going to give it back to me, right? This contract is established between these two entities, these two people. So the first and foremost thing before we getting into the dynamic testing of API is ensuring that these contracts are correctly defined. So how can we do that? In API world, people will know that it is Swagger interface or open API references, or there are say WSDL for WSDL documents which can be used for the API contract. So there are many more form of contracts using which the services that can be provided by a API can be defined, right? So the testing team takes it. So right now in our LLA testing space, we are doing mostly the REST API testing. So it is mostly say the document, the contract document, or we say test TDD documents, because most of our development teams are following the TDD approach, test-driven development approach. So they define what they are going to develop, right? So that will be the input for our for our API testing team, and we'll ensure that all the endpoints are correctly named in that document. So the naming conventions are correctly followed, and also the resources and their types are correctly reflecting in the object model. So the object models would have been defined in the contract. So this is the structure, this is the schema in which I'm going to ask you the data, this is the schema in which I'm going to provide you the data. So these sort of communications, and also all the error handlings, how the server is going to respond to the client when say an invalid things are asked, right? So how am I going to respond to you? So all these details would be mentioned in that contract, and it's tester's responsibility to ensure those are correctly defined, so that it helps the development team. In case if you identify some issues there, then it helps the development team to correct them first and then develop them, right? So it is also one way of identifying the issues at the very early stage.
That's really interesting, right? I think there's a lot of companies doing contract testing, and it'd be really useful for them today, based on what you've said, to understand the use case and why it's important to do contract testing before you get into overall dynamic API testing.
Sure.
Awesome. So switching gears a little bit, one of the things that you had shared with us is a sample integration diagram of Liberty and how your overall process works, and I'd be intrigued to understand a lot about that process. So it'd be nice for you to explain it.
Sure. Yeah. So this is a very high-level abstract diagram, right, of our architecture diagram, where the customer is given a broadband connection or mobile connection, and he wants to understand what is happening with his account. Then what kind of communication he makes, and how is that communication be addressed by the systems existing in the LLA world, right? So here he's given an opportunity to call the customer care, and when he calls, he lands on the IVR, and that IVR as you know, right, any IVR at the end, it can direct you to the call center, or it can try to fetch some details from the system based on the inputs or based on the key inputs that you are giving on the call dial pad, right? So whenever customer is selecting those options, so in turn, what is happening is it is connecting to the conversation cloud platform, and that happens to the API calls. So that is the first level of API calls happening between the IVR system and the cloud system. And once the cloud receives the information, then it translates and it converts into the next set of API calls, which will be then sent to the layer, that is the MuleSoft ESB layer, where there are so many APIs are exposed to the cloud conversation platform. So it picks the right API and it asks, okay, this is the information that customer wants, and do you have it? So this is, and it comes through the API calls, and people know that the API calls will have many parameters, maybe like say query parameters, or can have values or parameters inside the body that is coming from the API. So likewise, this is being sent to the MuleSoft ESB layer. And finally, this talks to the CRM applications we have. So we have multiple CRM applications based on the markets. So every market uses different types of CRM applications. I have given a few examples like say provisioning, billing, say collection, etc. So let's assume that the customer wants to understand how much is his balance, right? So he's using the LLA's mobile connection, and he wants to understand what is his balance. And he can call the customer care, and the IVR can suggest him, you don't need to go to customer care. By selecting certain options, you can understand, or you can get the detail that you want. Then if he prefers, he takes that route, and finally it lands at the CRM application, the right application, the billing application, and it gives back the details that customer wants. It is the entire end-to-end process that happens here. Not only through call, he can go through, say, WhatsApp chat, or if he is having a mobile application of LLA, and even there he can try to get some certain information from our CRM applications. So this is the high level, in the sense, illustration of this diagram, how it works. And I just wanted to give you, because right now we are focusing on doing the automation for these APIs at different layers. So that's why I wanted to share this with the audience.
That is a fantastic use case. I think for me, I have had a lot of learning in the last couple of minutes, just listening to this use case, right? Specifically around customer service. And who knows, it could be a completely new avenue for us to focus on in the upcoming months as a vertical, because there's a lot that goes into a customer interaction. I've called multiple customer service companies and not gotten responses. These days, the IVR responses and the automated responses are getting much better. And it's really good to understand what's really happening in the back end and what all needs to be tested in this overall life cycle, right? Because if the IVR is going to give the balance of some other customer or the bill of some other customer, the customer is going to get upset. And there's a lot of things that can potentially cause damage to the company overall. So I think it's a really good context that you've given us. So the ESB layer here is going to be helping you queue the number of requests, correct?
You're right, yeah. Queuing, or it is directing to the right ESB, in the sense, right servers and right methods of the APIs.
Awesome. Hey, so thank you so much for sharing this. This is really, really useful. And I think you also wanted to talk about some of the opportunities for API test automation in general. So I'd be intrigued to hear your thoughts on what that looks like.
Yes. So as I was explaining, Gokul, so 7-8 months before, we were trying to do some API automation and API test automation, but there were a lot of challenges that the team was facing. So I tried to list down the challenges and the opportunities that we had for that API test automation. So the first thing is they were, in the sense, testing them manually. So they were using different tools for connecting to the API, and then getting back the responses, and then they were manually validating them. So you know it, right? So you know it, when the API responses are coming in JSON format, the size of the JSON is too huge, and for a manual tester to understand where exactly to locate the data that he's looking for is the first challenging task. The next is he has to validate whether it is as per the license requirements or contract or not. So all those were done manually. And say if this API testing is happening release over release, and if someone is coming and asking him to give the history of what he has done in the past, that manual tester used to struggle a lot, because it's not that easy to organize. Because when we say API testing, the best thing is we can test so many scenarios comparing to UI testing, because it provides us it gives us the liberty to in the sense change each and every value that you can send through the request and see what is happening and how the server is responding. So in that case, he might have tested so many scenarios, and if there is a question on how this particular scenario worked a couple of releases ago, and he will not, most probably he'll not have answer, right? So he might need to spend a lot of time to get that answer to the person who's asking that question. So that is another challenge that our team was facing. And also organizing the test executions. As you know, Liberty Latin America is serving for different markets, and also we have to test in different environments, right? So it is not only the test environment. So whenever we move from, say, dev environment to test environment to UAT, so in every environment we wanted to do API testing so that we can minimize the UI testing. So that was the intention of having the API testing. And when the markets are increasing and when the environments are increasing, and sometimes due to the failures, if we have to execute it more number of times, then the complexity is also increasing in organizing these test cases and test executions and test execution results, right? So that was also another challenge which the team was facing. And very importantly, so if you give this control to the testers, people will, in the sense, they take their own approach, and they go for their own way of triggering scripts. Someone will be good at writing Groovy scripting, someone would be good at doing manual testing and keep record of everything in an Excel. So there is no uniform way of seeing things. So if there is an ask, how many number of test in the sense API test cases we have, and how many were executed, and what happened in a particular release and a particular cycle, it was very difficult to get that overview and the overall status. And finally, so when I say API, right, it is combination of all. So we are just not using REST. I said predominantly we were using REST. We are using REST API, but there are instances where we use SOAP and GraphQL too. So we needed a solution, or we needed a tool which can cater all these needs. And yeah, as you know, so I'll talk about how we handled all these things using our Katalon Studio. Gokul.
That is fantastic. So I think there are quite a few challenges that you have listed here, right? Just testing APIs manually is a humongous task. You need to have a history of these tests. You need to organize these tests. You have to have a way of viewing all of these tests in one place. You may have multiple different projects that you're working on, and your QA managers, QA leaders have to see those reports, make sure there's a consolidation of all of those efforts. And there are different types of APIs that you mentioned. One of the questions that I wanted to ask here is, how do you measure API test coverage? Is there something like that you measure today from an API perspective? Or it's more a holistic application level test coverage metric?
It's at the API level only. What we are doing is, right now we are using Jira as a test management tool. So here we define all the test cases that we are writing, irrespective of the type of testing that we do. Say it is API or functional testing. We would like to have an entry in Jira. So we use X-Ray for test management, and we create test cases. So for every scenario that we want to test for a particular API, so we list them down. And also all the APIs that we want to test is also listed as a QA task, right? A QA task or a requirement for us in our Jira board. So for every requirement, we link the test cases that we create and we attach or we tag to that requirement. So likewise, few APIs we may not be able to test, or we don't do automation testing due to its complexity sometimes, or due to its criticality, and we wanted it to be manually tested and ensured, or some specific testing that we wanted to do with that API. Again, in the sense security aspects or performance aspects, those things we don't cover it as of now, but we have plans to cover it in the future. But all those things we keep it as a separate in the sense task, and we do that in the sense at the end of the release with specialized teams, or we find a way to handle those requirements. Apart from that, it's when you ask about coverage, it's like, so how many APIs we have for a particular release, or how many APIs are modified for a particular release, or how many APIs are migrating from, say, MuleSoft 3.9 to 4.2. So that would be the number. And after which, how many for so many APIs, out of so many APIs, for how many we have test scripts or test cases in Jira, and how many of them are linked to the test scripts. And these numbers right now we are taking from our Jira dashboards in order to see the test coverage of the APIs.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for giving additional context. Let me move into the next slide real quick. I'd love to understand how you accomplished a lot of those challenges in conjunction with Katalon. I would say it's about people, process, and technology, right? Technology plays a part, definitely, but it's also about the process that you intake and the level of experience that you bring in to establish those best practices. So I'd love to understand how you did that.
Coming to the since the test pyramid, we have touched based on it when we discussed a couple of slides ago. So here the advantage, right? So as I was saying, comparing to the UI testing, we can do more testing in the sense we can go to the details of all the APIs. Say if it's a mandatory field or mandatory value that has to be passed from the payload, the request payload, then we can play with it, and we can check. Say what if I send a invalid data to that particular field, or what if I send the data which the system cannot accept. Right, and also I can leave it empty. So this can be done for each and every field that is there in the API. So if it's a UI testing, it's limited, right? So we might do it for a very couple of fields, very critical fields, but we leave it for the other fields. The reason is it is going to take a lot of time for us to cover it at UI level. But when it comes to API level, it's just the same test script with different parameter. We can ensure that all those are covered, all those scenarios are covered. So that's why it's giving us the more test coverage. And then the best thing is it's very quick to execute comparing to the UI testing. So we don't need to wait for hours and hours to get the reports, right? Get the results of our API testing. So it's say right now we have close to 2,000 scenarios automated, and it takes a maximum of say 2 to 3 hours, and I'm just quoting the highest numbers. Sometimes it goes very fast, say less than an hour. If I do a parallel execution, I will get the report and results of what is happening with the APIs. So that is the next advantage that we are seeing. And also it helps us to identify the defects in a very early stage. As I was explaining, these testing we do even before the UIs are getting ready. So even before when I talked about the static testing we do with the contracts, so that is even before the development is commencing, right? So in this way, what we are doing is we are helping the development team to build it with quality. It's not that the testing team will always find defects after it is developed, right, in a developed product. So we help them in building product with quality. So that is the best thing about this API testing. and also more reliable. Why we are saying it more reliable? So it's not flaky. Most of the times the API test cases, in the sense once you automate it, it stays the way we automated, or it doesn't break that much. The people who are doing UI automation knows how often the UI scripts are broken or flaky, right? So they have the maintenance work will be more when it comes to UI automation. But coming to the API automation, it's more reliable, and yeah, there will be maintenance, say, but comparing to UI, it's very, very minimal, and it's not that huge. And earlier indication of performance and security, what I mean by that is that there will be SLAs defined for every API with respect to performance. And yeah, we know that if we want to do performance testing, we have to simulate the number of users that is mentioned in the SLA, and the load that we want to, in the sense, generate to test the performance testing. All those are fine, but still, given the functional testing phase, how is the API performing? Even here, at this stage itself, we'll get an idea, right? It's a kind of a sanity of performance we are doing using the API testing, and we understand how much time it takes. And also, we can keep 1 or 2 functional API test cases with huge payloads, right? To ensure that the APIs are not breaking. So that is also another advantage. And security, it's inbuilt, right? We are not going to do a very detailed or very in-depth security testing when we do functional testing, but we do a certain level of security testing, because we are right now using the bearer token, and sometimes we are using the client ID and client ID API tokens for our APIs. So we try playing with those as well. When we do the functional testing, we change them, or we provide the invalid bearer token and see how the system is behaving. And also we do role-based testing. So say a particular role is allowed to get certain details and not the other details. Then what we do is we try to get the details that that role is not supposed to get, and see what is happening. So kind of we are covering the performance and security's sanity when we do the API testing through automation. So that's the advantage and benefits of API testing in our testing phase.
That is awesome. Yeah, thank you for being really detailed. And I think that's definitely good information for the folks who are seeing it. So I guess switching gears a little bit, you want to talk about best practices in the API test automation part. So I'd let you talk about it.
Sure. So we have almost covered the static verification that we do in the previous slides itself. So let me jump to the dynamic verification, right? So when it comes to test strategy, we ensure that we do all these types of testing that we have mentioned here, right? So first thing is the positive testing. So when I say positive testing, what is expected out of the API, and we ensure that is being delivered by the API, right? So that's the first thing. So when we say positive testing, it can be extended a little bit with the parameterization, right? So you can pass different types of values. It's not that only we test one API with only one set of data. We will test it with different set of practical data and ensure that the APIs are performing good. And we can do this positive testing at a individual API level. So say we can take one API and we can ensure it, and also we can do it in a workflow. So what I mean by workflow is, let's take an example of, say, creating a customer and then giving him or provisioning him a service, and then adding products to the service, and finally say you want to give some discounts or you want to give some bonus to the customer. So all these things can be done through API by going through in a sequential order, and then finally we ensure that this sequence has worked correct, right? So in order to do that, yes, we have to, in the sense, play a little with the APIs, because the output of one API is going to be input of the next API, right? So this adds a little technical complexity to the scripts that we are building, but with Katalon, that is also completely, in the sense, easily done, right? That can also be done very quickly and easily. But only thing is, the person who's doing this automation should know about all these different APIs and its contracts. So we do the positive testing at the individual API level, and also we do the positive testing at the workflow level. So when I say positive testing, what are the things we will validate? So it is first status code. So say there can be for positive scenarios, we get say the 200 status code, and for negative testings are for say if it's not working, or if due to some reason if it is failing, we get different status code, like say 400, 300, depending on the situation of the server. We are going to get back the status codes. And next is the response header. So what is the data that we are getting back in the response header? So when I talk about response header and the response payload, what I'm thinking is here again, we are covering the security aspects, right? So sometimes the API should not expose the internal schema or internal in the sense structure of the database, how it is getting stored. And this also has been validated in our positive testing, right? What is supposed to be exposed to the client, that is the sense, that is the minimal exposure that we should do from our server side. So that we validate. And also very minimally we do the application state also. What I mean by application state, at the end of this process, say provisioning, adding products, and then giving discounts, and we go to the UI application and open it, and we see if the customer is correctly reflecting in the UI or not. So that is what we call as application state. After doing the API testing, we ensure very minimally, not that extensively, because
so
our
going and checking a customer's account and seeing if the discount was actually applied.
You're right. So that is required. Say if we are doing say 100 test case execution, we do it for 1 or 2 just to ensure that it is working fine, right? And that is what we cover in positive testing. And coming to negative testing, there are 2 aspects to it. One is all the invalid scenarios are handled correct or not. The second is how it's handled, right? So it's very easy to break the system with invalid in the sense data, or say invalid authorization, or say providing some illegal characters. So with that, we will try to break the system and see how it's handling it. And another point is how the system is gracefully giving the error messages to the user, or error messages to the client when such request is coming in. The reason is it's easy to say that it's not working or it is not correct, but we also ensure that the response that server is providing is intuitive, and the person who's receiving the response can understand what exactly went wrong in his request, so that he can correct the request and then send it again to get the proper response, right? So that is also one of the aspects which we keep in mind when we do our negative testing. And coming to non-functional, as I said, we do a basic of these performance and security testing by sending the huge payloads, and also by changing the authorization tokens and say bearer tokens. So that's what this test strategy is all about. So we ensure we do this for all the APIs that we take, and we define our test cases and we define our test scripts to meet all these different types of testing that we want to do. And coming to best practices, we try to parameterize the variables that we are going to send, in the sense the data that we are going to send in the request to the maximum extent. The reason is we don't want to create multiple, say, web service object in Katalon Studio. Say there can be one base URI, and then post that base URI, we might have to add some path parameters. And that can result in, say, hundreds of combinations based on the methods and objects available in the API, right? So we don't want to end up in adding 100 or 200 objects in our Katalon Studio. So what we do is we parameterize it, and we ensure that wherever possible, we get the data from either, say, Excel sheet or database, and then we pass it to the script, and that gets processed, or that gets converted into requests, and it is hitting the web service. So that is the first thing. And also all the validations. When we say validations, I was talking about the status code, and also I was talking about the payload validations, right? So even the validations we drive through data, because depending on the input data that you pass, the output that you're going to get from the response is going to change, right? So accordingly, you need to verify the responses. It's not that always you receive the same response in your response payload. So even the validations that we want to do, we keep it in, say, the isolated data pool. Maybe it's an Excel sheet, a CSV, or a database, and validations will happen from that data pool. So that is the second best practice we are implementing. And also we try to use as much as realistic data as possible. When I say realistic,
how do you get that today? Like, I think one common question that people would have is like, do you use production data, or like how does that work in your organization today?
Yeah, exactly. So every, in the sense, release or whenever we require, we ask for the production data refresh to our test environment. So when that refresh happens, we are loaded with data from the production. It's scrambled. So it's scrambled, and the required security measures are taken before it is refreshed into the lower environments. But once that data is there, we take it and we try to mimic the data whenever we are trying to create our automation, whenever we are trying to execute the automation test scripts with that data. So that's how currently we are doing that. So it's if we are testing it for the, say, Puerto Rico customers, Puerto Rico market, and we try to provide the names from the Puerto Rico market, because every market can have different sort of names, and there are scenarios where certain markets will have names with some, say, apostrophe or some colon. So we wanted to have that realistic data so that we understand how the system behaves for it, because we don't want to be creative in providing data. Maybe during the negative testing, yes, we in the sense go wild and try with all different data, but when it comes to positive testing, we try to stick to the realistic data as much as possible. And coming to organizing the test suites, it's a great feature available in our in the Katalon, and we create test suite collections based on the type of test that we are preparing, right? So the bare minimum the test suite collections you can see in our API testing projects is smoke and regression. But under the smoke and regression, again, we can have multiple types of, or multiple lessons, branches. Like, say, I can have one smoke for say 4 to 5 APIs, or if I can have another smoke for a different group of APIs, right? So likewise, the regression suites can also be changed. So depending on the release that we go in, the amount of regression that we would do, or the priority of regression test cases that we pick and create regression test suite will vary. And accordingly, we will create the regression test suite collections, and everything was aligned and organized in our test suite collection folder of Katalon Studio. And always we execute the smoke suite first, because we will know the status of the build within minutes time, right? So within 2 or 3 minutes time, we will understand that whether we can proceed with our regression or not. Because as I said, when I do regression, sometimes the data that I have prepared for the regression can get exhausted. So after, say, 60 minutes, if I come to know that the regression didn't work because of so and so reasons, and the data is also exhausted, the preparation effort that we have spent would have been wasted. So that's why we always do smoke first with a very minimal set of critical cases, which can tell us whether the build is good enough to start with our regression or not. And finally, all the executions are saved. So the reason why we are saying executions are saved is it is automatically done now. We are not putting any manual effort to save this. Right now, test ops is what we are using for our test executions, and test ops is taking care of storing all the execution reports and responses and everything. And whenever we require to take a look at the execution or take a look at the previous execution's status, we get into test ops and we open the dashboard and see what has happened. And from there on, we'll get the lessons. We'll be able to go to the files in test ops and see all the files that we stored and saved, and we can utilize it, or we can take it for our future references too. So these are the best practices we are following in our LLA testing space.
This is really good, right? I think I have learned a lot from this session so far, right? And this is really educative for a lot of customers. And I also like to thank you for being a champion, right? I think it's really important to do and find those best practices and share it with the broader audience, as well as keep promoting it. And I think that's really helpful, and we need a lot of champions like you, right? And I think so. Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah. So I just wanted to take a couple of minutes, walk through some of the things that Logu has covered in today's session. in terms of best practices and how it, translates into the vision of the end-to-end quality platform that we have to offer within Katalon. Katalon, just for your reference, has been in the market for more than 7 years. We are an open and extensible end-to-end quality platform. That really means that we connect with a lot of tools that you've already been using, right? We don't want you to go change your existing investment and have to go and buy several different solutions in order to use our solution. We are quite open and extensive in terms of plan, build, and orchestration integrations. In fact, we keep launching a lot of partnerships every single month as we see fit. Just to give a little bit more context around Katalon, we are an end-to-end automation platform where we help with creation, automation, execution, management of environments for your overall tests across web, API, mobile, and desktop. That's one of the key advantages that Logu mentioned as well, right? So you, irrespective of the type of the application that you're working with, we can help you support it, and we can help you go through a lot of those different and difficult scenarios that you may encounter. And on top of that, we can collect a lot of that information into our common test ops platform, where we do test intelligence, test management, and test execution, where we integrate with a lot of other solutions like Jira that Logu mentioned today that they are using within Liberty Latin America. We can also help you execute your tests either locally or in the cloud with our own test cloud offering, or we can integrate with a lot of the partners that already help with cloud-based infrastructure, test execution capabilities. So that's the end-to-end overview of the Katalon platform. Just to summarize that, we do authoring, analytics, and execution all in one platform across web, mobile, API, and desktop. So in case you're interested, reach out to us at sales@katalon.com or send us a request. We're happy to help you through your transformation as well. With that, we have a lot of customers who are in the space who are incredibly happy customers and have gone through a lot of transformation with us. So really excited to be part of Katalon again in this overall transformation that we are doing across multiple companies and helping a lot of companies move to the ideal state or the nirvana state within test automation, if you will. There's always something to automate, of course. So keep automating and keep learning. We'll come back to you with more exciting sessions. And thank you, Logu, for staying late and spending the time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to emailing us. I know we at the top of the hour, so we probably won't have enough time for Q&A. But a recording of the webinar will be sent to everyone inbox. And should you have any question, happy to jump on a quick call to discuss more. Again, thank you for your support, and please looking forward to more webinar like this in the future from Katalon.